Good morning. Welcome back to the second part of the first lecture, which was an introduction to language. So there are 10. First of all, is characteristic of a human language. First of all, is arbitrariness. It is one of the basic features of language. Words have no principles and systematic connection with what they mean. For example, the first three numbers in English are 1, 2, 3, but in Chinese they are yi, er, and san. Neither language has the right word for the numerical or anything else, because there is no such thing. Even onomatopoetic words for sounds like ding dong and click that are supposed to sound like the noise they name actually vary from language to language. Even the speech sounds of language are arbitrary. English is spoken using 36 different sounds, but the sounds that are employed in English are not all the same as the sound needed to speak other language, nor they are put together in the same way. These 36 sounds, represented by 26 letters, are in turn arbitrary. Some of them represent two or more sounds, while other sounds are spelled in two or more different ways. The patterns are also arbitrary, in which words and sounds are arranged. Perfectly well, one knows what tax mean, but any English speaker without a doubt knows that there is no such word like xat, which is XAT. In English, adjectives go before nouns, such as fat man. Nouns occur before adjectives in French. It becomes homme gros. Arbitrariness is a characteristic of a sign language as well as spoken language. In sign language, some visual signs are iconic. They look like what they mean, but most sign gives not the slightest clue to their meaning. It is generally the case that there is no natural connection between a linguistic form and its meaning. From words, one cannot look at dog, the shape of the Arabic word dog, and determine it has a natural meaning, any more than you can with its language translation for the word dog, with the word Arabic, which is kelb. The form of linguistics has no natural or iconic relationship with that four-legged barking. Object out in the words recognizing this general fact about language lead us to conclude that a feature of linguistic sign is their arbitrary relationship with the objects they are used to indicate. A human language form shows a feature called arbitrariness. In language, there are some words that have sounds in which they seem to echo the sound or object or activities. Example of English language might be crash, slurp, or squish. However, in most languages, these onomatopoetic words are comparatively rare. The wide majority of linguistics expressions are in fact arbitrary. Most of animal signals most of animal signals there does a connection between the conveyed message and the signal used to convey it. It appears clearly one has this impression of the non-arbitrariness of animal signaling may be closely connected with the fact that for any sorry for any animals the set of signals used is in communication is infinite. The linguistic symbols are arbitrary because each language community picks them very haphazardly. There is no any formal relationship between the words and what they mean. For example, there is no particular reason why the dog or cow or table was named so. They could be named otherwise. That's why we have different words in different language. The second characteristic is displacement. Displacement is one of the features of language that refers to the capability to speak not only about things that happen at the time and place of talking, but also about other situations, real or not real, past or future. A human can talk about electronic parts catalog while playing cards, while saying other things, As far as one knows, most of animals unable to do that. Nonetheless, as the research suggests that bees, for example, the bees, can direct other bees to a food source, although in some limited fashion, this might mean that bees' communication system is also have this property. Human language are able to express, communicate about things that are absent and things that are present. That's to say, we can also talk about abstract concepts and things that are far away in terms of time. For example, we can talk about colonialism that took place in Africa some years ago. Controversy: a dog cannot tell you what it did yesterday or what it's going to do tomorrow. This is only a feature of human language. Now we move to cultural transmission. Language is culturally transmitted from one generation to next. Also, human language acts as a medium of transmitting the culture of a particular society from one generation to another. The transmission is done as young ones learn the language. Now we move to discreteness. The sound of human language are meaningful, distinct. For instance, the word man and ban differ from each other in only one sound. As you can see, the difference is only one sound is sufficient enough to cause different meaning. So we can identify sound, which is not the case with animal communication. The discreteness helps us to distinguish words like pig and big, back and back, come and some, go and so. This is discreteness. Now we move to duality. Language consists of two levels: the sound level and the level of meaning. At the sound level, we pronounce sound units or phonemes, which are similar in numbers to the basic sound possessed by animals. The average number is between 30 and 40, but each phoneme is meaningless in isolation. The phoneme sounds becomes meaningful only when they are combined with other phonemes, like for example the sound f, v, k, g, d, t, o, u, a, e, o, and le schwa, compare when they are combined. For example, go, which means go, van, and these words are meaningful only when the phonemes are combined together. Now, productivity, which is creativity. Language allows speaker writers to produce and understand new utterance never heard or produced before. That means it is possible for someone to pronounce new, which is novel, sentence which has never been said before and still be understood. It is also possible for someone to understand new sentences produced by others. For example, someone may say, phonology is a linguistic study of speech sound. You might not have heard this sentence before, nevertheless, you may understand it. Now we move to interchangeability, which is reciprocity. Language allows communication to exchange position. At one point, the communicator, which is the speaker, but are the others, he becomes the listener. When one person is speaking, the other is listening, and when the listener starts responding, the speakers become the listener. This property of language is called interchangeability. Now we move to reflexiveness. This is the ability of a human language to talk about itself. A sentence is like English is an international language. It's just one case of how language can talk about itself. This property makes a human language different from animal communication. Now we move to specialization. Human language has specialized terms for some expression. For example, a male head of secondary school is called headmaster, while a female is called headmistress. Also, there are special terms for adult and young animals. For example, goat, which is the kid, cat, kitten, cow, calf. There are special terms related to movement depending on its nature. For example, swagger, which means to walk in an extremely proud and confident way. Run, to move using your legs faster than you walk. March, to walk with stiff regular step like soldier. This all this is all specialization. Now we move to patterning. Human language has internal organization within the system. It is not just a heap of isolated items. Humans do not use sound and words in a random way, but sometimes changing the pattern also changes the meaning. Now we move to function of language. The first function of language is communication function. This is the function that most people would select as the principal function of language. It is true that communication is the most dominant function of language. Communication is a two-way process. In one way, we are able to use language to express ourselves to others, and conversely, we use language to understand what others are communicating to us. The second function is fatigue iterational function. The word fatigue comes from the Greek and means utterance. The term was coined by Malinowski, who discovered that much of what we say is formalic and found that the same is true of all language. He is suggesting that language is the glue which links people together. Fatigue function of language is used when we want to open communication channels. Communication can hardly begin without a greeting. The fatigue function of a language is mainly spoken, but there are some written equivalents. Now we move to emotive expressive function. Language is also used to express personal emotion. A great deal of what we say when angry or happy is said just to relieve the physical and nervous energy. For example, words like shit. Also imagine a word example like shit. Also imagine a football fan watching TV giving instruction to players. He's going to say, "Go on, don't mess about, or for God's sake," or shout. The instructions are perfectly useless. They serve no communicative purposes. Now we move to instrumental or regulatory or directive function. Language is also used for the purpose of warning or impairing disciplines into the middle of the people. Think of what politicians and religious leaders do when asking for votes and preaching, respectively. They use language to win people's respect. Also, for us teachers in school, we may give commands to students to get things done. In this case, language is used to give direction by which things are done. Now we move to reasoning function. It is argued that speaking while thinking makes the speaker concentrate on what they are thinking. A majority of thinking is done in words. A common view of language is that it is instrumental, which is a tool of thoughts. Even writing and speaking begins with thoughts. Language not only expresses thoughts but also created it. Now we move to recording function. Language is used to record something we wish to remember for the future. It can be a short time record like a shopping list or long term record like a diary or history or some kind. Think of the Bible, the Quran, and the legal documents like Constitution. These documents here serve as a recording function of the language. They do not serve the communicative function. The identifying function language has a function of identifying and classifying things, places, people, and social classes. For instance, it is easy to know the person's place of origin by simply hearing his/her pronunciation. Also, learning the names of things allows us to refer quickly and accurately to them. To take a fairly simple example, let us consider all those terms which classify types of residence: a house, maisonette, flat, caravan, bungalow, castle, mansion, place, and a hut. These are all identifying function. Performative and declarative function. Language can also be used for the declarative purpose, in such a way that the expression gives given may change the state of affair in the words after they have been pronounced by the appropriate authority in appropriate situation. For example, in the pastors declare, I pronounce you husband and wife, he automatically becomes so. Here, language is said to have performed. This function is also known as the declarative function. Now we move to the poetic and the aesthetic function. Language is sometimes used artistically or aesthetically. In literature, the meaning of words can be widened or narrowed. Also, the use of devices like onomatopoetic alienation and asonance all draws the pleasure we found in poetry, as do rhythm and rhyme. This use of words to achieve an aesthetic and artistic effect in terms as poetic function of the language. Now we move to metalinguistic function. Language can also be used to talk about itself. For instance, now we are using the language to talk about language. Such use is termed as metalinguistic function. Linguists describe various aspects of language such as word classes, phrases, clauses, and pronunciation. The informative, the last function is the informative function. Language is also used as a medium of passing and or conveying factual information. It is used to inform about something that happened, is happening, or is going to happen. Also, when someone needs help, may inform others who can help. Like, for example, consider these following internet examples like, would you help me if you were in my show? Or, we are leaving now. Or, it's called in here. These are all functions of language. The last part of our lecture will be key concepts of the study of language. The first, the first key concept is linguistics. This is the scientific study of language. As a scientific study, it involves scientific procedures like observation, data collection, data analysis, hypothesis, formulation, experimenting, and conclusion. It also applies principles and theories from different scholars. There are many branches of linguistics, including historical linguistics, sociolinguistic, psycholinguistic, philosophical linguistics, comparative linguistics, and etc. After linguistics, we have linguist. This is a scholar who studies language scientifically. A linguist is not necessarily the speaker of language. He or she is studying it. That is to say, the linguist is only interested with the language pattern of the language he is or she is studying. Say, for instance, the linguist may study the grammar, phonology, lexis, and semantic of Chinese language while he is not speaking Chinese. The lingua franca is an auxiliary language that is used to facilitate communication among the people who use different language. Also, it can be defined as a hybrid or other language used over a wide area as a common or commercial tongue among people of different speeches. When people who have different languages come together and need to communicate among themselves, they need to they need a common language that connects them in areas such as trade, education, and politics. This is what we technically call lingua franca. For example, Kiswahili is a lingua franca of the most Tanzanian. English is also a lingua franca in the words it connects most of the countries and continents. Now, first language, which is the mother tongue or the native language. This is the language which is which a child is the first acquire from childhood. The child does not need formal classes to be able to speak the mother tongue. For example, English is spoken as a mother tongue in the US, UK, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. Mother tongue is not necessarily mother's language. The mother may be speaking French, but if the child grows in an area where English is spoken, and as such the child acquires English, that is the mother tongue that the child has acquired. Now we move to the second language. This is the language learned or acquired. For example, you are acquiring English. This may be learned for different purposes like commerce and trade, education, sociability, or government activities within a given country. For instance, English is used as a second language in countries like Kenya, Nigeria, India, Pakistan. In some countries, the second language is also national language. For example, English in Nigeria, Kenya, and in Zimbabwe and Uganda. Some speakers of the second language manage to attain high proficiency in the second language, and some even manage to reach a standard similar to that language. The last key concept is national language. This is a language that is considered to be the main language of a country. A country may choose one variety dialect and declare it a national language. In many countries, the national language is also official language, used in government, courts, and law, and official businesses. For example, here in Algeria, the international language is Arabic. In France, the French is as his national language. English is in the US and in the UK and other Commonwealth countries as Nigeria and Zimbabwe. In countries with many languages, the term official language is preferred, or we can call them multilingual nations, or you have a multilingual language. This concludes our course about with the second course. This concludes the course. Sorry, this concludes our course about the introduction to language. See you next time until the next course.